but if we could cuddle, or if we could cook together, or if we could find other ways to connect and build that intimacy, if we could enjoy those long connecting talks and find our connection and our love right there in our conversation, that would be fulfilling for me. So asking those questions, what would be fulfilling for you in how you would want to connect intimately?
I'm Rachel, and you're listening to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. Hello, and welcome back for another episode of Owning Your Sexual Self. Very excited. This is a topic today of discussion. We have a guest on, Aubri Lancaster, and I'm really excited. I met her in a group of intimacy professionals and whatnot recently, and I was like, hey, you specialize in something that I'm very curious about and I think would be a good topic on our show. And so we are talking all about things regarding asexuality, or ACE, if you will. So a little bit about Aubri before she jumps on here. Aubri is an independent AASECT and ANTE UP certified sexuality educator and conducts workshops and trainings for clinicians and sexuality professionals. She's been doing this since 2017, and also doing in-home adult toy parties, since 2003. Aubri has presented for numerous organizations, including the American Psychiatric Association, the GLMA Annual Conference on LGBT Health and Planned Parenthood of Southwest Oregon, amongst so many others. So girl has it going on. So as a Greyromantic asexual person, Aubri has lived experiences and a connection to asexual and aromantic communities that provides a unique perspective on the issues facing the changing landscape of sexuality and orientation today. You can find out more about Aubri at www.acesexeducation.com. Or on Instagram at AASECT. We'll make sure to share that in all the show notes. But we're diving in today, so I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Without further ado, let's bring Aubri in. Right. Hello, Aubri. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. I'm very excited. As I was saying, the term asexuality and aromanticism has been more in my vocabulary these past couple of weeks since working with a client that is exploring this. So it's not something that I feel like I have the expertise in. Of course, I feel like the general knowledge, but I'm very much looking forward to this conversation today for people that might be also exploring this, same as this, this client that I'm working with, to have as a resource. So
yeah.
I always like to ask too, when sex educators come on the show, like, did you ever see yourself doing this as a grown up? Were you in preschool? Like, I'm going to talk about sex when I grow up, or not so much?
Not exactly, but when I was 7, I told my parents I wanted to be an actress, and I kind of pursued that until college, where I got a BA in theater as well as a BA in psychology. And then I was doing auditions and stuff in Hollywood, and I had an agent and whatever. But then in 2003, I started doing passion parties.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a stage every night. I did a party, and so I kind of got that need met as far as theater. And I realized I was actually helping people and there was a purpose in it. So, it kind of shifted and this became my career.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like similar for me. So I am with Pure Romance. I have been for almost 11 years now. And at some point there was like an overlap. I don't know if you were still a part of passion parties when that happened, but I feel like same. I had been the person like that was comfortable talking about sex as a young adult. But I never imagined that I would be doing this, though sometimes I look back on those things that I did as a young adult and I was like, man, I was really born to do this actually. But Pure Romance is actually what got me into becoming a sex therapist, a sex educator, sex coach, all those things, from their conferences and things. So that's really neat. Yeah. And I agree with like the stage, right? Like, all eyes on you. Okay. I get to now deliver this really great, empowering sex education to you now.
Yeah.
Might not have known what you signed up for, but you're in for a real treat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we might have been at conventions the same time. I was with Pure Romance for about 4 years after
Okay,
they bought Passion Parties.
for
And
sure.
so,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, perhaps our paths crossed at some point. So fun. Okay, cool. So how, again, I like to hear people's story on this. So I know you're AASECT certified, so you've gone through the training. You're not new to this by
Mhm.
any means. But in our conversation today, right, asexuality, aromanticism, how did that come up for you? How did that, right, become your niche, let's say?
Yeah, well, I didn't really understand that had always been part of my journey. Part of getting into passion parties was to learn how to enjoy sex.
Mhm.
And the products are amazing. There's so many different ways to access sexual pleasure with different tools and devices and creams and all of that fun stuff. And so that kind of motivated me to share that knowledge with other people, what I learned about the body and everything. And it actually wasn't until lockdown 2020 that, we all had way more time to think about ourselves than ever before. And I finally came across the language of asexuality. I'd only ever heard it once at a convention where it was on the other end of a line from hypersexual. So it was set up as from asexual to hypersexual. And so I just understood it in the context of libido. So it wasn't until I finally understood it in the context of an orientation
Mm.
that that line they set up is really misleading. Like, it's hyposexual to hypersexual. And asexual people may be hyposexual or hypersexual, or they may not even need those terms, and it is an orientation. So some people are sexually attracted to people of same or similar gender. Some are attracted to people of different genders, some to all genders or regardless of gender, but we also need to include no gender or no one, that
Mhm.
some people just don't experience sexual attraction, or rarely, or only under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Um, so that was one piece of the puzzle for me. And then the other piece was understanding the differentiation of types of attraction, because I have experienced romantic attraction, but I don't think I've ever really experienced sexual attraction. And so when I finally understood that those two things could be separate for some people, that was, I think, my biggest aha moment. Like,
Mhm.
oh, so what I've experienced may just be romantic attraction, and the sexual attraction thing
Mhm.
that other people experience may just not have been part of mine.
Mhm. Yeah. Interesting. And I know exactly the graph that the line, right? The hypersexuality, the asexuality. I know exactly, I've seen this before, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm very aware now, and you're right. And you saying that, I've never looked at it that way, but you are exactly right. It should be hyper and hypo, 100%. Um, and yeah, so okay, so just so again, I want this to be a resource for people. So can you give us a definition, or the definition, right, or your definition of asexuality, and then aromanticism is something separate. So can you give us both?
Yeah. So, definitions can be very limiting because, a single sentence cannot encapsulate an entire experience.
Yes.
But the currently most commonly used version is asexuality describes sexual orientation where a person experiences little to no sexual attraction towards other people.
Mhm.
And aromanticism is a romantic orientation where the person experiences little to no romantic attraction towards other people.
Mhm. Okay.
So that's kind of the, you know, simplified nutshell version.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, for people that are going through life, like why am I not feeling turned on? Why am I not desiring sex? Why don't I want to just, right, like rip my clothes off when I see my partner getting out of the shower? These types of things. Exploring something like asexuality could be an option for them. And I think for so many, I know I'm not fully in the camp of like, let's give you a label, but I also fully believe that having a label, or knowing that you are involved with something, or like a part of something, right, to give something a name to it, I think is definitely beneficial to people, so that they don't feel, right, I'm the only one in the world, I'm the only one that's experiencing this, and so gives them other people then in some cases, right, to be able to relate to.
100%. My favorite quote is actually from a Tumblr user, Bisexual Baker, who said that as any cat owner will be able to tell you, somebody else putting you in a box is entirely different from getting into a box yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Taking on a label, finding a label that helps you to communicate your needs and boundaries and find community is very, very different from somebody else coming along and telling you what your labels must be based on their perceptions.
Yeah. Yeah. And so people in your work, are you working mainly with single individuals, coupled individuals? What does that look like for you?
Most of my work is actually doing workshops where I bring this kind of language and other aspects of sexuality into a workshop space, mostly virtual. I do a lot of training of therapists and sexuality professionals because that was part of my aha was if I've been in this industry for as long as I have and I'd only ever come across the term once, and I've been to conferences beyond, party conferences, and the language just wasn't there. So I knew that our field needed to understand these experiences. So that was a big part of why I brought it in here and why I focus a lot on professionals. I do some one-on-one consultations with the general public, people looking to explore their own orientation experiences. But yeah, I'm part of communities, so I hear a lot of what's going on. But my work is primarily with those who are working with these communities.
Yeah, wonderful. Perfect. Because that's exactly what I want, right? I want somebody to be able to listen to this and be able to have a better understanding. And again, going back to this diagram, like I feel like I'm about to get schooled on this podcast because I think that that's the knowledge that I've actually been operating from for quite some time now. So this is interesting. I'm humbled now in this recording. Okay, so I'm thinking of my own clientele, right? So I work with primarily cisgendered women that are in heterosexual relationships. That I would say that's primarily my population. And so the number one thing women are coming to therapy for or coaching for is low desire, right? Mismatched libido, low desire, not wanting sex. And in some cases, it's like, okay, I can find reasoning behind why that might be. And a lot of cases, it's like you actually are experiencing the desire. You just didn't realize that you were experiencing desire, didn't know that it was there. Or right there, like their partner's initiating, and they're like, nope, I'm immediately a no, and I'm not even open to the idea of exploring, like, okay, if I give this some time, what could happen? But then there's this other group of people where truly, right, like I've worked with them, we've done the things where it's just still not there for them. And I feel like the general consensus of these people is like, well, that's it, I'm broken, right? Something's wrong with me. And so I'd love to hear your insight in this of how can we normalize asexuality more, and maybe even do you have some statistics around like what is the percentage of population of people reportedly that right have named themselves as asexual?
There was I think it was 2019 Ipsos survey that showed that generationally speaking, it's going to be different, but Gen Z is at about 2% of those who identify as asexual. So the percentage of the population that's identifying with this spectrum is increasing. A lot of that is because the language just is finally available to us. Like I was 39 before I finally had access to that language. It would have been a very different story for me if I had had access to that language 20 years earlier. But yeah, the number of people that identify with the spectrum is growing. Some of the stuff that you talked about that brings things to mind for me when we talk about desire discrepancy. If you pick two random people out of the population, the odds that they're going to have a completely perfectly matched desire is extremely low. Chances are somebody's going to be higher than the other. And, while the narrative is often that the higher one is always going to be the man, that's not always the case, So anyone of any gender may be the higher or lower desire partner. Then let's talk about that language of desire. If we think about the word desire, and some of the other language that's commonly used around it, especially including the word libido. Often libido and desire are used interchangeably, but they're not the exact same part of the experience. I think of libido as the body just asking for an orgasm or some kind of sexual stimulation. It's just saying, hey, I'm here. I need release of some kind. Desire is, as Emily Nagoski would say, that's the wanting. That is wanting to engage with that libido. Neither of those elements require sexual attraction. Sexual attraction directs libido and desire at a specific person that they find sexually appealing. So you could have an active libido, you could want to engage with that libido and still not find anyone sexually appealing to engage with in that activity. So somebody who has an active or high libido who's asexual may prefer solo sex, or they may choose to engage in consensual sexual activity with another person for other reasons. Sexual attraction is a mechanism of arousal, but it's not the only mechanism of arousal. There's lots of different reasons people have consensual sex. And when you're talking about, a coupled committed relationship, if there's romantic attraction, if there's love, if there's, trust, and they want to engage sexually, then that's just as valid a reason. But that can also mean it could be very confusing for them when it's a constant struggle to get into that space of wanting interpersonal sexual activity.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of layers to it.
There is, yeah, and I'm here like, okay, let me keep up with this, right? Because I as you said, I'm glad you normalized, right, and like affirmed this can be confusing, right? And again, with somebody that's trying to find the label, if you will, it's like, okay, well, some of this applies, but some of this doesn't apply. So yeah, so it's falling into the desire, and then as you were speaking, I'm like, okay, somebody's going to be listening to this and somebody's going to naively say, well, they just haven't found the right partner yet.
Yes.
True or not true, right? Let's confirm
that is a common, that's a common, what we would consider a microaggression. It's a very common thing that is used to dismiss the identity and experience of the person who is identifying as asexual.
Yeah. So my listeners, that's the first thought, because I know the audience. I get questions all the time. Who said this and what tell me more about that. Interesting. Okay. And then what else on asexuality? Because again, I'm coming into this pretty naive, I would say myself. So and you do this on the regular, your education and your trainings and workshops, what else are we missing here? What else do the people need to know, the listeners need to know?
One of the things that, especially when I'm working with therapists, a lot of therapists are trying to find a reason for the lack of desire, or, what is the disconnect? Where is this coming from? And what I like to put on the table is you don't need to rule out asexuality to give people space to just not want sex or to not want specific sexual activities. So when we're trying to be like, how can we get to a place where they are engaging in sexual activity with the partner to, kind of create this sexual intimacy, we need to make space for that to not be part of the plan. We need to make space for non-sexual forms of intimacy and pleasure to be centered in the relationship. Yeah, right. It's not, and I say this often, like, it's not just about sex, right? Even as a sex therapist, right? That some people are like, what do you mean you're a sex therapist? It's like, no, there's so much more to it. And so let's say for the person that is coming in, they're wanting to want more sex more, right? They might be an asexual person, may or may not know it yet, but they want to want more sex. Do you still like, I guess you can't answer and say like, well, they can't call themselves asexual because they can do whatever the fuck they want to, but you get what Absolutely.
I'm getting at, right?
Well, my question, well, first of all, asexual people can want sex. But again, why do they want to want it? Do they want to want it because there is societal pressure telling them they're supposed to want this? Is it because their partner wants it and they feel like they need to want it to be compatible with their partner? Why do they want it?
Mhm.
And I think that's an important area to explore
Yeah.
because all of those social pressures can be really suffocating.
Yes. Yeah.
So if they were to never have sex again, how would they feel about that? Does that make them sad? Like maybe it does. Maybe it's like, no, I kind of, I don't want to never have sex again.
Mhm.
But, maybe once a year or, every few months, not, what the frequency that the partner necessarily wants. And maybe the answer is yes. Oh my gosh, that would be such a huge relief. Oh, if I could never have sex again and we could just cuddle or we could do all of, I hate the word just, and I still use it. I'm trying to get it out of my own vocabulary because it does devalue these other activities. But if we could cuddle or if we could cook together or if we could find other ways to connect and build that intimacy, if we could enjoy those long connecting talks and find our connection and our love right there in our conversation,
Mhm.
that would be fulfilling for me.
Mhm.
So asking those questions, what would be fulfilling for you in how you would want to connect intimately? Intimacy being closeness and connection. So the conflation of intimacy with the sexual can be very confusing too. So, what do you and your partner both find fulfilling
Mhm.
that you can center in that relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. And what happens when somebody is in partnership and decides or realizes that they're asexual? I'm trying to not fuck up terminology here. Um, and but they have a partner that is, let's say, hypersexual or has a higher sex drive and is wanting, right? What do you then tell the partner? You're SOL. This is right, like you need to find somebody else. What would you say for that?
Well, nobody owes their partner sex,
Right. I
ever.
agree.
That's your body.
Yeah.
You do not have to share your body with another person sexually if you do not want to.
Mhm.
Socially speaking, let's talk about another activity. Let's talk about hiking.
Mhm.
If you have one person who's really into hiking, that's their favorite activity. They just absolutely love it. And they really want their partner to go hiking with them. And their partner doesn't want to go hiking with them.
Mhm.
What pressure is necessary to place on that partner to make hiking important to them too? That just may never happen.
Mhm.
So our society makes it very easy to go, okay, go find another partner to go hiking with.
Mhm.
And that doesn't have to affect that interpersonal relationship.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's a lot harder around the sexual because we have a very monogamous focused society where that's heavily shamed. But every person is responsible for their own sexual pleasure. And, there are many other things that an allosexual partner can do to find their own sexual pleasure and engage sexually with their own body, find ways to get to an intensely sexually aroused state. And that doesn't always have to have an interpersonal element.
Mhm.
Now, again, just like with the hiking, if the person just that is their entire life is going hiking, and so they never see their partner
Mhm.
because they're always hiking, then yeah, maybe it's not a compatible relationship.
Yeah.
But you have to put it on the same playing field as any other aspect of a relationship where there's incompatibility.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, right? Like we don't owe sex to anybody. I'm thank you for that. And I also, again, because if I'm working with couples, right, and I still don't want the partner in the relationship to feel left out. I don't want them to feel like their needs are not being met. And so let's say if they're, I might explore, okay, what happens if we open the relationship? Are you open for them having sex with other people? No, I'm not, that's not okay with me. So yeah, would you deem that in your expertise, your professionalism, would you deem that, yeah, like not a non-compatible relationship?
So again, we create this kind of deal breaker around sex
Mm.
that because sex is positioned as the most important part of a, married relationship or a committed, coupled, heterosexual relationship or whatever,
Mhm.
that it must be a deal breaker if it's not there.
Mhm.
And for some people it is. But to assume that that is going to be a deal breaker
Mhm.
is more pressure, you know?
Yeah.
So, do they have enough else in their relationship that they enjoy that they can center in the relationship so that the sexual isn't really as important?
Mhm. Mhm.
How important really is that compared to all the other things that they enjoy in their relationship? Because really, how much of your partnership is spent having sex?
Very
There's a whole
small,
lot of other
scheme
things.
of things, right? Yeah, like pretty small amount generally.
Right. And again, for some people, yes, it may be, like, hey, we realize this is just not going to work out. Like I divorced my first spouse where this was a huge part of that. That was a
Mhm.
huge part of why, we just weren't compatible on that level.
Mhm.
But we can't assume that asexuality or stopping the sex in the relationship
Mhm.
is automatically a deal breaker.
Yeah.
So, similarly, as far as opening the relationship, that's it's a very intimidating concept because we have a lot of stigma around it. So, if it's just presented as, what do you feel about opening the relationship? That's also, it kind of creates this one sided view of it.
Mhm.
So, how can we look at non monogamy in a more ace inclusive way?
Mhm.
Platonic intimacy, emotional intimacy
Mhm.
is very powerful and important too. What kinds of deep emotional bonds does the asexual person have outside of their coupled relationship?
Mhm.
Are there emotional connections and platonic connections that they would like to nurture and spend more time with in potentially a one on one setting?
Mhm.
So, non monogamy that includes an asexual person in that doesn't mean that only the allosexual person, allosexual being a term we use for people who are not asexual, it doesn't mean only the allosexual person is creating new deep connections.
Mhm.
An asexual person may create or nurture other relationships too. It just may not include sexual activity.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, if that is on the table and they're considering it, because some people do feel pressured into non monogamy, and that's not okay either, you know, we have to honor all of that. But if that is something they are considering, make sure that the asexual person understands the benefits to them too, the extra time they may have with the platonic connections that are in their life that
Mhm.
they may want to nurture. It's like, hey, how would you like to just have a weekend getaway with your best friend?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And for again, kind of keeping the focus on coupled relationships, what advice would you have in terms of supporting the allosexual person supporting the asexual person that are partnered together? How can they be more, yeah, supportive, understanding, caring in regards to these things?
This is where I think a lot of the language out of the kink communities are super helpful.
Mm.
Learning about negotiation, consent, safe words, aftercare,
Mhm.
all of the different things that can help to figure out, what do we want to do together? Because, an asexual person may, one of the additional language that I find really useful: favorable, indifferent, averse, repulsed. So
Okay, got it.
we may have different attitudes about sex socially versus personally. So, in a social or cultural way, we can look at it as some people are sex positive. They have a positive attitude towards the idea of sex in general, not necessarily for themselves, but hey, sex is fine if you want to enjoy. Sex neutral, they don't really place any value point on sex. And sex negative, where they may think sex is bad or dirty or wrong. This is across the spectrum of orientations, we have this language. But then for personal attitudes about engaging in sexual activity, some people are sex favorable. They want sexual activity, regardless of orientation.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are sex indifferent. They'll take it or leave it. You want to have sex? Sure, let's have sex. Some are sex averse. They don't want it. It does not appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And some are sex repulsed. They have a visceral physical response to sexual content, activity, any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that language can also be used on specific activities.
Mm-hmm.
So, an asexual person may want to engage in some interpersonal touch of different kinds, and really breaking down all of the different options and using that language. How do you feel about it? Are you favorable, indifferent, averse, repulsed?
Mm-hmm.
Can help to start to look at, rather than this huge wall that just went up, like, oh, everything's off the table.
Yeah.
And instead really start to break it down. The Scarlettine yes, no, maybe inventory stock list is a fantastic tool for that, because it isn't just focusing on, like kinky activities. It is everything.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about being naked in front of somebody? How do you feel about them being naked in front of you? Do you like kissing closed mouth, open mouth, no mouth?
Mm-hmm.
These kinds of little breakdowns can really help to, give more diversity to how we explore what we actually want. Because very often an asexual person or a low desire person spends a lot of their time defending their no.
Yeah.
So if we can step away from that no and look at what is a yes, or if yes, no is really difficult to even identify, what's favorable?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is appealing?
Love that. Yeah, and is that, I want to be able to link that as a resource for people, because I think that's going to be very helpful. I've only ever operated from the want, will, won't list from the aspect of kink exploration. So this sounds like something I can use for many clients.
Absolutely. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll pop that in the show notes. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, I feel like we could go on and on and on for this, but I want to make sure that we give some insight on aromanticism, and right, there's probably things that we need to talk through in regards to that. So tell us again, because I've already forgotten, tell us again what aromanticism means in the general scheme of things, and what do we need to know about this, whether if I'm in a partner relationship or if I'm single.
Yeah. So aromantic is a romantic orientation where the person experiences little to no romantic attraction towards other people, or is disconnected from societal tropes of romance and relationship formation. So some people connect to aromanticism because they don't or rarely experience romantic attraction. Now, what is romantic attraction is a contested question. But in my research, what I came across that I think may be analogous for a lot of people that are in that space is the concept of limerence.
Mm.
So limerence was coined by Dr. Dorothy Tennov for her 1979 book, Love and Limerence. And it describes the experience of romantic love and romantic attraction, including the components, characteristics, and the progression. And limerence includes that intense euphoria when you think they like you back, norepinephrine dumps, serotonin dumps, all of the good chemicals. You feel like you're walking on air, as well as the intense heartache if you think they might not like you back.
Mm-hmm.
Their good qualities are magnified and bad qualities are minimized, excused, and ignored. There's intrusive thoughts where you can't get the person out of your head. All roads lead back to thinking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And it thrives on hope and uncertainty. So hope for reciprocation. The goal of limerence is reciprocation of feelings of love at a similar level of intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it thrives on hope and uncertainty, the hope for reciprocation and uncertainty as to whether or not those feelings are reciprocated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why in romance movies, the culmination of the movie is the kiss or the proposal or the wedding, some form of commitment that ends the need for hope and uncertainty, so that they can move into companionate love. Limerence is temporary. It can last a very long time as long as hope and uncertainty is there, but it is not a forever state. It's also not the only way to access companionate love.
Mhm.
And my favorite analogy is having a baby. We know that some people have a baby and are immediately in love with their baby. Intense euphoria. Nothing else matters. They are in love with their baby.
Mhm.
And some people take days, weeks, or even months to bond with their baby. Bonding does not require that intense euphoric state. That is one way to access bonding.
Mhm.
So some aromantic people may never experience limerence or experience it rarely, only under certain circumstances, or they don't like it and they want to avoid it. And that means either they may be single at heart and they actually thrive in singlehood and that's their preferred state, or they may find platonic life partners to be more appealing,
Mhm.
or they might like the idea and the performance of romance, the idea of going on dates, of giving gifts, of, having those get to know you conversations. But those activities may not involve those intense euphoric feelings and still may move into that progression of long-term love and commitment that is very similar to what alloromantic people experience after the limerence phase is gone.
Mhm. And how much overlap is there with aromantic and asexuality?
Some studies show that about 75% of people who identify as asexual are alloromantic, so only about 25% identify as aromantic, but there's also aromantic people who are allosexual.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there's overlap, and the language has often come from mutual spaces, but for some people, they're very distinct aspects of relationship formation and bonding.
Mhm.
For some people, they're both, and they don't really understand the distinction because there is no distinction for them. They may experience neither, or when they do experience both, they're both.
Mhm. And so somebody that is aromantic could still be in partnership. They could still be in a relationship as you're speaking more, maybe more platonic or like companionship is the word that's coming up for me, but I don't have a romantic attraction to you, but I like having somebody else here in my space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some people prefer to be in their own space. Some people prefer to be in a space with other people. And that's kind of also across the board.
Mhm.
Single at heart is a term coined by Bella DePaulo. And being single at heart does not require being asexual or aromantic.
Mhm. So many things. I feel like yeah, there's so many things, and I think it just goes to say, right, like for anybody, there's not just one way of doing relationships, of doing sex. There's such a vast variety of just in diverse variety, right, of just different ways that we can identify or different things that we can explore to again allow ourselves to feel seen and to feel heard and to feel validated. I think is probably the biggest one. Again, going back to like I'm not the only one that are having these feelings or lack of feelings or thoughts or whatever it is, and I know in your work, so you're primarily doing a lot of education for therapists, counselors, and things like that, but right, that's for a reason. People are seeking you out for a reason because I think that, as you said, the language is becoming more available. People are now knowing that, okay, this actually might be something that fits for me, right? This is something that I can relate to. And then I just now I'm thinking like community wise, right? How amazing to have somebody else that also identifies as asexual, right? To be able to talk through things with and get support from, and again, not feel that aloneness.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay, this was a lot. I don't want to like miss anything, or is there anything else that we didn't talk about, I didn't ask about that we feel, I'm sure you're like, yeah, probably a million more things, but to keep
I,
this
I
in
do a
time.
I do a 6-hour training
Oh
on
my gosh.
asexuality and aromanticism, in
Yeah.
addition to a whole bunch of other workshops that I've developed. So, yeah, we could talk for a very long time. Ultimately, I think it comes back to reminding people that it's okay to not want sex. It's okay to not want romance or not enjoy it, regardless of orientation. You don't need to, you know, be asexual or aromantic to not want those things and to center other things in relationships, or to have relationships that don't fit the amatonormative narrative, which amatonormativity is a term coined by Elizabeth Brake to describe the hierarchical prioritization of exclusive amorous relationships over all other relationships in one's life. That doesn't serve everyone. Some people thrive in that and some people don't. So, really leaning in and finding out what fulfills you. What do you enjoy? What would be a fulfilling kind of relationship or lived situation for you? And where can we go from there?
I love that. And I thought today's conversation was a really good starting point for people. And as you said, you offer a 6-hour training on this. So for people that are wanting to explore this more, I think you're a great resource. Obviously, very well versed, very good understanding in all of this. So how can people find you? How can people connect with you if they're interested perhaps in doing this longer training? Or you mentioned doing consultations with people individually. Tell us all the things. How do we get to you?
My website is acesexeducation.com. So ACE Sex Education. And from there on the menu, you can see my ACE and ARO course, which is the 6-hour training with 6 ASEX CEs. And then you can also see my workshops and see which ones are coming up in my rotation. You can join my newsletter mailing list, which I only send out once a month. I do not bombard you with a ton of emails, and that will definitely keep you updated on my next upcoming workshop or any other opportunities to learn. And that website can also connect you with booking with me for a one-on-one consult. And my consults are on a pay what you can basis. So, whatever is within your budget, I appreciate, and, no judgment.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yes. And then same thing, Ace Sex Education on Instagram too, correct?
Yes. Yeah. That's where a lot of my free offerings are. I also share about workshops upcoming there. And yeah, I try to be really accessible. So I'm always happy to field emails or, direct messages on Instagram. And, whatever I can do to help people to better understand this language, because there's a lot and it's very nuanced and complex.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think it would take me, I feel like I have a better understanding, much better than again, the diagram that I've been operating my mindset on. But certainly like I would want to go through this, and perhaps even I'm going to check out your training for myself. Absolutely. Because I think this is important for people like me to be better versed in this than I was going into this podcast today.
Another resource for those who don't want to do trainings, the book ACE by Angela Chen is a fantastic overview and introduction, and is very easy read.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, we'll include that in the notes as well for people. Okay, Aubrey, thank you. This has been a great conversation today. I appreciate you coming on the show again. And thank you for just literally niching in this population, because we need more people like you that are talking about this, and like you said, bringing this sort of language to the surface for people to explore. So I appreciate you and the work that you do. And thanks. I know it's a little bit earlier in the day for you, so I appreciate you getting up for us.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving the opportunity for people to learn more about this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you really fucking loved it, make sure to tag me on social media at @TheRachelMain. I'll see you next week.